It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us from London, Nico Hines, world editor of The Daily Beast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good evening.
Welcome as well to Sylvie Kaufmann, editorial director for French broadsheet of record Le Monde.
Good evening.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you as well. Aishigul Sert, a journalist, independent journalist, Aishigul Sert. How are you?
I'm good. You?
All right. This is, in journalist parlance, it's called a hardship post. Someone has to report out of Saint-Tropez on the French Riviera. Journalist Dana Thomas is the one. Your latest book, Fashionopolis, The Price of Fast Fashion and the Future of Clothes. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. He was 2 months away from turning 100 years old. Prince Philip had occupied the job of consort of the British monarch for nearly 7 decades. Nico Hines, I know it's a moment that Britain had long been preparing for. The BBC interrupted their programming to play God Save the Queen when it happened. He was sick back in March. Nonetheless, it's still a bit of a shock.
Yeah, it seems it's a real shame he didn't make it to 100. That would have been impressive. And traditionally in this country, when you get to 100, every single person who reaches that milestone gets a letter from the Queen to mark the occasion. So it would have been nice if he'd got there, which is only a couple of months away. But he has been sick for a very long time, and I think it's fair to say that he's had a good, long innings. So it was something that we knew was coming, really.
Knew was coming. Prince Philip and Dana Thomas. I missed seasons 2 and 3, so I'm not as up as many in the newsroom on the Crown's take of it. But it's interesting how the royal family seems to always come back into our lives.
It surely does. It surely does. And, in good ways and in bad ways, and Philip in the last few years, it's been trickier. He was seen as this stalwart husband of hers early on. And then he tried to modernize the monarchy in his way, especially with that famous documentary that only a few clips remain now on YouTube that was a big faux pas in the end. But he really did try, and he did try to steer the family. He's the one who brought Diana into the mix to marry Charles, which was, of course, a catastrophic incident on many levels. And then he also, in the last few years, he's become grandfatherly, and like all good grandfathers, had his moments of faux pas.
I know that Sylvie Kaufmann follows royalty with a passion. Did you know that the Russians have sent condolences and pointed out that he was a great-great-grandson of Czar Nicholas I?
Yes, he apparently, among lots of foreign blood there was Russian blood in Prince Philip also. All French people are fascinated by royal families, and I'm sure the Russians are too, because they also have this heritage. But I don't know, you mentioned the crown, and it's so much mixed now in our perception of the royal family that it's very difficult to distinguish what...
It clouds our vision?
Yeah, I think so. And I must say it shed a light on Prince Philip that I didn't suspect. And I think most people didn't suspect. Maybe British people did. But his relationship with his children was very weird, I must say. Particularly with his firstborn son, who we still wonder, will he ever be king one day? It's the fact that he insisted to send him to this terrible school in Scotland, where that he had enjoyed, but where Prince Charles was apparently bullied. All this makes, a strange figure. Then we hear that he modernized the monarchy. Maybe he did, but to me, what happened with Diana and more recently, this is really, as I said, it's fascinating, but it would be very, very difficult for me to make a judgment.
It's hard to pass judgment, yet we seem to know bits and pieces so much. In a 1997 speech, Prince Philip discussed the secret to a blissful and enduring marriage when your spouse is called Elizabeth Regina.
I think that the main lesson that we've learned is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. It may not be quite so important when things are going well, but it is absolutely vital when things get difficult. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
The Queen has the quality of tolerance in abundance, he said there.
Well, the thing is that in these past hours when I've been watching a little about his death, it's always these questions that comes, how will someone be remembered? Whether he had also Greek blood too. I mean, he was born in Corfu and until the age of, 18 months, I think he was in Corfu in Greece, and then he came here. So the Turks are actually right now talking about this. But what was very interesting for me is that right before coming here, I spoke with my family and they're in Turkey. And my mother remembered, with the royal family, I think what fascinates us is that we always have the feeling that we know them, that they are a part of us. And she said, well, I remembered when in the 1970s, which is in 1971, when Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh did come to Turkey and Istanbul, and I did meet him. And I do remember in 2008 when they came back as well. So even if we into Turkey, so even if we have never met them, there is something that stays of them with us.
Yeah, one extraordinary incident. 2014, the Queen pays a historic state visit to Northern Ireland. Prince Philip finds himself alongside the late Martin McGuiness, whose Irish Republican Army in a previous life had assassinated Prince Philip's uncle, Lord Mountbatten. Your thoughts about that moment, Nico Hines?
Yeah, well, it's extraordinary, isn't it? The mixture of politics and the royal family. I think the reason that the royal family has been so enduring and, like we've been saying, remembered in Russia, in Turkey, all over the world, is that it doesn't really get involved in these sort of political discussions. That's what sets it apart from every other royal family, which in many countries has been involved in all sorts of coups, or we've seen what was happening in Jordan this week and all this palace intrigue. The British royal family is just a kind of friendly family, and you want to catch up with the gossip. You don't conflate it in your mind with these political actions. And, the way Prince Philip was able to just carry on with his duties despite being right next to somebody who had that vicious impact on his life and to carry on exemplifies the way that they just kind of show this British stiff upper lip. And I do think it's quite impressive that they've managed to keep it up for so many years, even though Prince Philip himself has made plenty of gaffes, and Queen Elizabeth's tolerance, as he put it himself, was certainly called into lots of use.
All right, put to the test, shall we say. Let's talk about Northern Ireland now. For the first time in 6 years, police there using water cannons overnight. After a seventh night of rioting, youth from both sides of the sectarian divide showing glimpses of what the North was like before 1998 and the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, the rioting continuing despite a joint plea from rival leaders.
There can be no place in our society for violence or the threat of violence, and it must stop. Just as it was wrong in the past and was never justified, so it is wrong now and cannot be justified.
It's not right, it's dangerous, it's unacceptable, and it is a miracle that as we stand here today that no one has been killed.
Now, the starting point of all this, Sylvie Kaufmann, was this funeral of an old dignitary from the IRA. Protestants complained that there wasn't COVID rules applied at that funeral, and that was enough of a spark for this now to last a whole week.
Yeah, well, I guess in Northern Ireland, sparks, you don't need much of a spark to make things erupt. And apparently there are multiple factors in this situation. The restrictions due to COVID-19 are probably a factor for the population in Belfast and Derry. There's been apparently increased police activities against paramilitary groups also. So there was tension. And then you have Brexit. We will never know what Prince Philip thought about Brexit, but I don't think you can hide that it is a factor. It increased the tension because there's this resentment among the unionist population that, the United Kingdom is now kind of divided into two trade zones.
Yeah, with an imaginary line in the Irish Sea.
Exactly, and it's not so imaginary actually, because there are customs checks. And so I guess, this conflict has been going on for so long, and I think it's so deeply ingrained in the mentalities over there that even things like customs checks, have some impact on the psychology of the people, I guess.
Aisha Gulsert?
Well, yes, I think that Sylvie Kaufman just touched on this. That what we see here, that there's an open wound that even since '98, when the agreement was signed, that peace is something that is very fragile, and war is something very easy to push. And so, but what is also I'm a little also surprised that we are surprised by this, because when there were all these dialogues and communications about Brexit, when the United Kingdom when Britain was still a part of the EU, it was always a red flag, kind of like an alarm, that went on when we said, hey, what's going to happen with Northern Ireland? What can happen? So I don't think that it is that it is over yet, that this is something that, even if it just slows down, might come up in a little while again.
Dana Thomas, you agree?
I do. I find it really interesting that, so many of the folks, the kids who are the youths, we should say, who are protesting and are out there, flinging fire bombs and in the streets, weren't even born when the Good Friday Accords were signed. Some of them are as young as 12 years old. And so you wonder how much of this is about the funeral, which was last summer, the line in the Irish Sea, which is troubling and strange, and how much of it is just sort of wanting to be a part of something, and taking all these bits that this boil that's been never really put to bed, really taken care of and cured, have been. It's coming back up, and there's a whole new generation who says, but we never had anything to do with this, and we want to be a part of this voice and action too. And so they're in the streets now. I find that very fascinating.
Nico Hines, if you take all the various factors that we've just been describing, which do you put top of the list?
It's very difficult to say. I do think that the pent-up frustration that we've all been feeling of being locked in our houses, and then compounded by seeing the police basically say to these senior politicians, including Michelle O'Neill there, who was at this funeral, that no action will be taken, it really does make people's blood boil. And I think, you saw in Norway, the police in Norway have just fined the Prime Minister for breaking COVID rules. And I think that's crucial in order to hold the peace when we are doing. Don't forget, the thing that we've been doing over the entire world, basically staying inside our houses for over a year, is an extraordinary, unprecedented thing. And it's surprising, I think, that there hasn't been more kind of flare-ups around the world. The other factor, and I think this also plays into it very strongly, is that basically Boris Johnson lied to Northern Ireland. He promised them that there would not be a border in the Irish Sea. And when he needed the DUP, which is the party that represents the loyalists in Northern Ireland, he tried his best to keep that promise. As soon as they've gone, he has basically just thrown out all those pledges, and he's done what he had to do to get a better deal for Britain. And I think the people in Northern Ireland who put their faith in the big country England to kind of look after them have just been so badly let down that it's no surprise that the frustrations are boiling over. So those two huge frustrations added together, I don't think it's a surprise that it didn't take much for this sort of flare-up to happen.
All right, sticklers for protocol, look away. The following images may be upsetting. To most of us, when the EU goes on tour, it always seems in the past like this two-headed beast, right? You can show images here from 2015, member nations represented by the European Council present. At the time, it's Donald Tusk, who you see on the left, the Commission represented by Jean-Claude Juncker, who you see on the right, and in the middle, the host, in this case, Turkey's president. So fast forward to 2021 and return to the Turkish capital.
French.
Ayşegül, those images edited because it was pool images, but you hear the of Ursula von der Leyen. What are your thoughts now? Because we've been looking at this nonstop for the last 3 days.
Well, two things. First, we've been. I heard a lot. I mean, I read and I heard a lot of conversations about, that the protocol. Of course, we should have expected this from Erdogan. I expected something like this from the Turkish president, because he's such an political animal that he thinks about all the details. What I did not expect is Charles Michel's behavior in terms of what I think he should have done is to get up and to actually sit on the sofa next to Ursula von der Leyen. And one of the things he's saying, that his argument is that, we were there in order to smooth and smoothen the conversations with Turkey, so we did not want to be very aggressive with this. But no, that shows again how basically the European Union keeps saying kneeling in front of Turkey, which it should not be doing. But what I would like to say, is that this meeting should have never happened. The fact that Turkey and the European Union are going to have better relations, I'm all for it. The timing is horrible. Students are incarcerated. The intellectuals, journalists, writers are being pressured, and the Turkey just came out of a convention for women's rights, and the fact that there are two European leaders coming to Turkey really legitimizes.
But is it better to talk than not to talk?
No, I think it's better to have waited, and words don't work with Erdogan anymore. And that's what I'm having I'm a big fan of the European Union. I'm having a difficult time understanding Ursula von der Leyen, who is in Turkey and who says, we are here, but we are really for human rights, and Turkey should be doing a better job. This government is not doing a better job for women's rights, for LGBT, for intellectuals, for freedom of expression. So there needs to be actions now to be taken.
All right, let's pick up on that when we come back. We'll take a quick break. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Daily Beast world editor Nico Hines joins us from London. Sylvie Kaufmann, editorial director of French newspaper Le Monde, is with us, as well as is independent journalist Ayşegül Sert. And from Saint-Tropez on the French Riviera, Dana Thomas. Your latest book, Fashionopolis, The Price of Fast Fashion and the Future of Clothes. Yeah, just before the break, we were discussing Sofagate. And we heard Ayşegül Sert declare the president of the European Council, Charles Michel, guilty of not doing more in that instance. In an interview with Belgian television, the former Belgian PM stating he deeply regrets the situation. It was a disastrous image. But the interview goes on long enough to become, a bit of a non-apology apology, in which he says, one can say I should have done this or that, but I had the conviction that this would cause a much more serious accident that would destroy the very fragile capacity to finally have a little less negative relationship with Turkey. Sylvie Kaufmann, your reaction to Charles Michel, what should he have done when you look at those images?
Well, this interview is rather pathetic, I must say, but and I agree with you that the whole episode overshadowed completely the real issue, which is relationship between the European Union and Turkey, which is a very serious issue we should be discussing. And instead, but we also have to discuss this because it was spectacular. And as you said, we have been riveted by these images, and we have government ministers all around Europe saying this was a disaster, that these images hurt, that's what Clément Beaune said. And I think it's, nobody comes out nicely of this. I mean, Erdogan doesn't come out great because obviously his services know very well the protocol of, who is who in the European Union. He's been dealing with us long enough to know this. the protocol.
And if you're a niggler, he is right. It is the president of the European Council that has precedence over the president of the European Commission.
Yes, but I mean, so, this didn't come out of the blue. Charles Michel's protocol service was ahead of the visit in Ankara to prepare this. This is always very carefully arranged, the seating arrangements and everything. So what happened, from what I gather from Brussels, is that the protocol service from the president of the commission, of Mrs. von der Leyen, didn't take part in this preparation. So there was a mistake, right, of their own making. And so Charles Michel is responsible for this situation. I think Ursula von der Leyen is also responsible for this situation. Erdogan is responsible for this situation. And we, the media, are responsible because we are making so much of it, because it is important, it is significant, it's true. And I must say, from a woman point of view, which woman hasn't found herself relegated to the couch, as you say, because men, took precedence and didn't care about what were the sitting arrangements. So we understand this, and we have to be indignant about it. But politically, it's a huge blunder also from the European Union.
And it happens just on the heels, Dana Thomas, of the EU's chief foreign policy man, Josep Borrell, who was in Moscow on the day when Alexei Navalny was convicted. And there he was standing at a press conference next to his Russian counterpart. Do you agree with Aisha Ghul that the meeting should have never taken place?
Yeah, I mean, what were they doing there? What was that about? And, it doesn't go unnoticed that this was just very shortly after Turkey's decision to pull out of the Istanbul Convention on violence against women. I mean, and then there's one woman in the room and there's this violent act against her, not just even by the Turkish leader, but also by Monsieur Michel. I mean, this was like the micro machismo aggression, like over talking during a business meeting. And we just sit there as women going like, right, hello. And yes, there may have been some protocol missteps from the EU, but these things are planned for months and months in advance. I worked on a presidential campaign. I know about the advance team and all that they do to make sure that everything goes right. And that everyone walked in that room and saw 2 chairs and 3 people, and nobody said, maybe nobody should be sitting down, I found remarkable.
Another precinct heard from Italy, whose new prime minister no longer speaks in technocratese the way he did when he ran the European Central Bank.
È dispiaciuto moltissimo per l'umiliazione che la Presidente della Commissione von der Leyen ha dovuto subire. Chiamiamoli perché sono dittatori, di cui però si ha bisogno per collaborare, perché poi uno deve essere franco nell'esprimere la propria diversità di vedute, di opinioni, di comportamenti, di visioni della società.
Calling Erdogan a dictator, enough to earn Italy a summoning of its ambassador in Ankara. And a tweet from Turkey's foreign minister: we strongly condemn the unacceptable populist rhetoric of the appointed Italian Prime Minister Draghi and his ugly and unrelenting statements about our elected president, putting the accent on the fact, Nico Hines, that, Draghi is not come to power through an election, but through a coalition deal.
Yeah, I do think that Draghi sums up the kind of problem with this whole episode, which is that Brussels seems to have taken to the fainting couch and can't believe the appalling treatment. And yet you look back at what Erdogan's been up to over the last sort of five years, and it's appalling. If you wanted to point out that Erdogan was a dictator, maybe he should have done it in 2016 when he was, silencing the country, arresting journalists, sacking tens of thousands of people from the civil service because he suspected they could be potential coup plotters. More recently, the UN condemned the Turkish-backed fighters in Syria, saying they were guilty of war crimes, killing civilians, kidnapping people, stealing property. I mean, this guy could legitimately be called a dictator for sure, but why wait until there's been a mix-up over the soft furnishings to stick your neck out and say it?
Well, I'm not going to go into the whole conversation of is he a dictator or not. I think that his actions already speak for themselves enough. But I can't wait to see the G20 summit in October when Italy and Turkey are going to get together. I think the problem I have with Mr. Draghi's comment was not whether he called Mr. Erdogan a dictator or not. The problem I have is that he said, but we have to continue to collaborate together. And that's the whole problem that I have with this meeting as well. In 2018, when Angela Merkel came to Turkey, we were several journalists, intellectuals to say, don't come. The timing is not right. People are being pressured and jailed. This is exactly what is happening right now. Again, we are in 2021. And I feel like Europe just keeps coming back. You know, it's kind of like an abusive relationship where you keep coming back to it. And that's what Europe is doing to itself in order not to have migrants on its soil.
Speaking of this idea of do you speak to them or do you not, it might seem like first world problems compared to the citizens of Myanmar braving bullets to defy the recent coup by the military. Nonetheless, the ambassador to the UK forced to sleep in his car after being ousted by his own military attaché. Britain denouncing the ouster, but regretting that under international rules, it recognizes states, not governments, and therefore has to accept whoever the junta appoints.
Will you return home if they don't support you?
You want me to see get killing?
You think you'll be killed if you go home?
Who knows?
All right, so there you heard the Kwaiswar Min, Myanmar's ex-ambassador to the UK. If you use the same logic as Aisha Gulsert, should Britain have then told the junta, no, that's your ambassador in London?
Well, you know, there are laws. There's international law. We're supposed to respect the rule of law. And I think if the UK has a point. If you don't respect the international conventions on diplomatic relations and the treatment of diplomatic personnel, then your own personnel is at risk also. So what I think the UK is doing, if I understand correctly, is that they will give him political asylum, of course, and will apparently they are giving him shelter. So, but you know, they cannot storm the Burmese and the Myanmar embassy and say, you know, we decide who is the ambassador. I mean, I'm afraid that this is not possible. But you know, the other issue is, and I must say this ambassador must be commended for the courage that he showed, just like the Myanmar ambassador at the UN did. But the issue also is that there are not more of them doing this. I mean, there are few diplomats abroad and who have from Myanmar who have decided, you know, not to obey and to denounce what was going on in their country. And the armed forces apparently really have a grip on their representatives abroad also. So this is really the very, very tough situation that democratic countries are faced with, the situation in Myanmar, which is terribly serious, I must say.
All right, and Myanmar is something that we're going to continue to follow in the world this week. A few weeks back, we discussed the backlash against corporations who oppose slave labor in China's cotton-growing Xinjiang province. Now it's the backlash against corporations who speak out against new voting laws in the U.S. state of Georgia. They include a ban on offering food or drink to citizens waiting online to vote. The likes of Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola are headquartered in Georgia. And now Major League Baseball has gone one step further, moving its All-Star game from Atlanta to Denver.
And all Americans should know what this decision means. It means cancel culture and partisan activists are coming for your business. They're coming for your game or event in your hometown. And they're coming to cancel everything from sports to how you make a living. And they will stop at nothing to silence all of us.
Dana Thomas, your reaction to the words of Georgia's governor there?
Well, as a constituent, I'm absolutely floored by it because I am a Georgia resident officially. And I think, cancel culture is being thrown around a lot these days. But, it was Marco Rubio who really upset me when he said that, Coke and Delta were the woke corporate hypocrites. And that Georgia Republicans are now retaliating against Delta by voting to cut off their tax break to the company. And this is the second time they've done that when Delta did something that they weren't really pleased with. They already did this 4 years ago and cut some of their tax breaks to stay in Atlanta. I wonder when Delta is going to pull up stakes and leave Atlanta, because it's getting a little too political for corporations. This is a moment where they have to make moral decisions. And okay, companies always have to make moral decisions, and then we see if they have their integrity or they don't have their integrity. But the Generation Z, who are now becoming powerful buyers, lots of power of the purse, really do care about the moral judgments that their companies, the companies they patronize, make. They really do want to hold them accountable. And so Coca-Cola especially, and Delta, of course, are going, we better not write off a whole swath of the American consumers, because we need them, and they really do care much more than the Georgia voter.
So following your logic, if you look at the calculus when it came to Xinjiang and Chinese social media suddenly canceling the likes of Nike and H&M, there it's just simply whether or not the consumers go along with it that dictates whether or not corporations have a conscience?
Well, what's happening there is that the Chinese market is so enormous for fashion brands that losing that market, as H&M got canceled in 24 hours, and Nike got wounded deeply there, it gave some of these brands that had taken a stand against this and said, we will not source this cotton from this region, to backtrack silently, showing their cowardice. PVH, Philip Van Heusen, which is a major, major fashion group. It owns, Calvin Klein, for example. They just took their statement off their website and went silent on the issue, instead of saying we're not flip-flopping, but they flip-flopped. Another one is the VF Corporation, which was Vanity Fair, and they own Tommy Hilfiger and the North Face. And these brands are quietly saying, well, maybe we will just keep sourcing from there, and hopefully nobody will notice, because we don't want to lose our share of selling in China, not just sourcing in China.
Nico Hines,
it's a moral moment. It's a pivotal moment for these brands, and they're going to feel it for years to come.
Nico Hines, it's this seminal moment in this new age of transparency we live in, where consumers do keep up with what's going on. And in Georgia, it's extremely polarizing, and basically these corporations do have to pick sides now.
Yeah, I mean, from my personal point of view, I'm not so interested in corporations putting out political statements backing one policy or another policy. What I want to see is what they actually do with their money. And I think that can actually have a huge impact. If you look at the pattern in the southern United States in recent years, North Carolina passed this anti-LGBT law, and corporations and celebrities and rock stars and film companies all cancelled concerts. They stopped filming schedules. Some companies said that they were going to invest there, and then they pulled the investment out. And that real financial impact, definitely contributed towards North Carolina then revising the legislation. There's no way that companies can get away these days with supporting bad actors. It used to be the case that companies who were independent were seen as trusted and centrist. Now they're just seen as complicit.
You agree, Aisha Gulsart?
I disagree on the second part, on the final part, because Nico said there's no way. I'm sorry, I forget the exact words, but that they can do this. We are letting Amazon do whatever Amazon wants to do, and nobody is doing anything about it. I was just reading about numbers. Jeff Bezos in the past year, what does he do? The sales of Amazon have rocketed by 40%. 80% on the stock market. You know, his personal, Jeff Bezos' personal wealth is at what, $86 billion. And what does he do with the money? Nothing. And look at the conditions in the warehouses today. Look at the fact that people are trying to get unionized in Alabama. I mean, I wish that everything was so black and white, but it's not.
It was voted down, by the way, that warehouse.
It was just they were being but what does he do with his money? For instance, someone like Jeff Bezos, it could be another multinational or another firm. Well, he's getting a lot of power and a lot of lobbying in Washington, D.C. So politics is always a part of economy, at least in the U.S.
And there is perhaps a turning point on that score. Rather than waiting for philanthropy, the U.S. president has now thrown his weight behind talks at the OECD to change the global rules on taxing companies. Washington now behind the concept that corporations pay levies in the individual nations where they do business, no longer where they are headquartered. The current rules, which have led, as you can see through this chart, to what's been described as a global race to the bottom when it comes to taxation.
We're working with G20 nations to agree to a global minimum corporate tax rate that can stop the race to the bottom.
So, is it a turning point, Sylvie Kaufmann?
Well, maybe. It could be one. It's definitely a bold move from Janet Yellen and the Biden administration. And by the way, this Sleepy Joe is really, surprising everybody. He's becoming Speedy Joe. But it's a chance. It's a huge opportunity to transform the fiscal international system, the tax international system, rather. And, the OECD has been trying to do this. It's been stuck because of Trump. And so if major economies can agree on a common tax rate for big companies, it will be a major achievement, I think, towards a fairer system. Now, the devil is probably in the details, so the Congress is going to look at this, the G7 is going to look at this, and there are a lot of things to look at carefully. Which companies are included? Are all the big digital companies included? What is in store really for European countries? This has to be very carefully looked at. But I think the first reactions from the European Union also shows that this move is being taken seriously, and it's a very positive move, I think, yes.
All right, only the beginning on that score. Sylvie Kaufmann, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank as well Aisha Gulsert, Nico Hines in London, Dana Thomas in Saint-Tropez. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.